Okay, in the last of these series of videos, we're going to take a look at some of the resources from the Make Sense Strategies Toolkit that are specifically designed to support project-based learning. And of course, in middle school, that approach to learning really kind of rules. So there's some pretty cool tools here that might be helpful to you. Basically, there are a number of resources for focusing on helping students do research and then making presentations, and also a number of rubrics on the software that can be really useful to you in this area as well. So there's a whole section of the Make Sense Toolkit sort of devoted to project-based learning, and so it's divided into different areas. Okay, so you have planning investigations, conducting them, making presentations, and then evaluating project processes and outcomes. So under the planning investigations, I'm going to click there, and that will open this page, and we're just going to look at a couple of these to give you a sense of what's here. We're going to look at draft plans. So basically that's a smart visual that looks like this, and it reflects a strategy for planning activities or planning projects. And so typically when you're doing project-based learning in middle school, students are working in teams. And so the team, one of the things that one of the first things you have to do is really figure out what it is that you're going to do. And so what the team does is they brainstorm a list of what are the major tasks that we're going to have to do for this project. Now this page has places for 4, and often there are more than 4 tasks, so they may need more than one page of these. But basically brainstorm a list of the tasks, and then for each task reveal what are some resources we can use to help us get that done. Now sometimes resources are going to be technology resources like the use of the internet, but they can also be print resources, but they can also be human resources like people they could interview or things that they could go visit and see and things of that nature in terms of the research. So for this task, what are some resources that we can use to help us get this done? And then for this task, assign duties. Who's going to do what by when on this task? Then the other thing we're teaching students to do is when they're working on this task is to forecast barriers. In other words, anticipate a problem that we might run into, and list what that problem might be. And then the last step is to target solutions. If we run into this problem, then we're going to solve it by. And so not only are we teaching students how to get organized for tasks and so forth, we're also teaching them how to be more proactive and how to anticipate glitches in the process and either prevent them or have some idea how to attack them. And so this is designed to get students to really think through on a deeper level what are the major components of a task. Then what we'll do is we'll repeat the same thing for the next task and so forth until eventually this whole thing is really fleshed out and developed. The last part of draft deals with these little bubbles over here. Now these can be the order in which the tasks occur or their priorities. For example, number 1 might be here, number 2, 3, or 4, but it provides some idea in terms of what is the priority or the sequence in which these tasks need to occur. Another one that under planning projects that might be of a lot of use to you is taking a look at goals and commitments. And so this is basically a goal sheet that primarily focuses on 2 major areas. When you're doing project-based learning, you're often, in addition to the content of social studies you're teaching, you're also teaching some pretty critical skills. And one set of skills deal with collaborating or working together effectively, and the other are effective work habits or habits of the mind. So for an example, in terms of collaboration, these are some common collaboration type skills, like listening without interrupting, taking turns and involving everyone, offering assistance, respecting different opinions, giving negative feedback when you need to, or peacefully resolving conflicts, etc. Generally, these are ranged from simple to more sophisticated. And so what we have each team do is to review what these different skills are and then select 3. They're going to be their priority goals. So ideally, you know, they're working on all of these things, but what I want them to do is just narrow it down to the 3 that they think are really important, that are going to be their primary goals for collaboration. And so, for example, they might be focusing on, well, we need to do more listening without interrupting, and we're going to do more encouraging and complimenting, and we're also going to, if we run into conflicts, we're going to solve them peacefully. And so they check off 3. And likewise, when we look at work habits, effective work habits, are things like using and keeping timelines, and resisting impulsivity, being persistent when times get tough and hanging in there, being open-minded, being accurate, checking for quality, etc. And so again, what we'll have each team do is review these and then decide which are the 3 that will be their primary goals and check those off. So each team may actually have different goals for both collaboration and work habits. Finally, students sign off down here almost like a contract. So by signing my name below, I'm making a commitment to developing a high-quality product that I'll be proud of, creating a product that will make sense to, be interesting and informative to my audience, being neat and careful, doing my share on time, and doing my best. So basically, this sort of is used at the beginning of a project to help set the stage for both positive collaboration and effective work habits. In terms of conducting investigations, there's some tools here that might be useful to you. We're going to take a look at information sources, for an example. Now, typically when kids in today's world, when they're doing research, they basically go straight to the internet and basically Google or use Yahoo or whatever to search for information and so forth. But what we're trying to do is get students to do use that resource, but also break out and use a number of other resources as well. And so, for an example, under print resources, you have electronic resources like the internet or a computerized search program at the library. Then you have a variety of paper resources such as novels, specialty magazines, reference books, newspapers, etc. And you also have human resources, for example, interviewing experts on a topic or having someone demonstrate a new way of using technology. Then you have various media resources that you can check out. For example, there are a number of movies that might be about the topic. There are a number of information-oriented videos, television shows related to the topic, and so forth, not to mention pictures and maps. Likewise, there are experiences that you can have to learn more about the topic, like places to visit or things to do, try things out, and things of that nature. So it's more than just read, print, and convert it into main ideas and details. It's rather scope out a wide variety of information and resources in order to do your research. So the way this is set up is we're encouraging students to use multiple resources and identify what are the major topics that the research is going to target or questions they're going to try to answer, and what resources they might use to help them do research on each of those various topics from their overall project. In terms of making presentations, there are a couple of goals, resources here. Just like multiple resources, one of the things we want students to do is to think about many varied and different ways of presenting their information. Now, traditionally, you're going to have the oral report where students are either making a PowerPoint presentation or they're standing in front of the room with note cards and so forth. And that is one form of presentation. But we also want students to think in terms of what are some other creative ways they can communicate ideas that will get the point across. And so there are two-dimensional visual devices to consider, like various graphic organizers. There's also things like surface maps or photographs or posters, creating a collage, an ABC pop-up book, PowerPoint presentation, etc. Then there are also three-dimensional devices they can do to help communicate their ideas, like creating a model that illustrates things or collect a series of samples or artifacts. They can actually, in terms of written documents, instead of your traditional sort of essay, they can actually compose fiction, a story, but that contains the critical elements of factual information that's being presented. They can simulate a business or a personal letter. They can actually create a comic book that illustrates the key things from their presentation. and so forth. In terms of performances, in addition to an oral report, they can do things like dramatize an event or dramatize a commercial, and the commercial is addressing key things that they've learned from their presentation, from the research or role playing. They can also simulate or conduct a real debate in class about their topic. They can simulate an interview of an expert, and they can also do things like use movement like dance or charades, and so forth and so on. So the key thing is that what we're trying to do is get students to kind of move beyond or outside the box a little bit and think about other ways of communicating cool ideas from the report and so forth. Now, presentation plans is another one. Now, what we're going to do here is sort of get more into the metacognitive aspect of making presentations and planning those. And so this is called PATH. And so you have the title of the presentation and who are the presenters. And PATH stands, what's the purpose of the presentation, who's your audience, what are your topics, and what's your hook. So under purpose, there's a series of prompts that we provide students to think about, okay, in terms of why are you doing this? And so one might be to inform or explain something, or to increase awareness of an issue or a problem, or to change an attitude or a belief, or to show a solution to a problem, or to change a behavior or a way of doing things, or to entertain. Now, obviously, it may be a combination of these. But the key thing is we want students thinking about, I'm not just out there presenting information, what's the purpose behind this and what do I hope to achieve as a result of sharing what it is they've learned. The second major area is to sort of dig down a little bit and think about who your audience is. And so there are a series of prompts here to help students think through some key things. Like the audience will mostly be adults or students and friends. And then if they're adults, they're going to be either teachers or parents or relatives. If they're students or friends, they're either going to be younger students, same age, or older students. And depending on who your audience is, that's going to have some influence, or it should, on how you present the information, because you want to think about your audience and what their needs are going to be. And so this second level is designed to get them to think through that a little bit. So the best guess about the audience knowledge of this topic. Well, one option would be, well, they don't know much about this topic at all, and it'll probably be new information to most of them. Therefore, we'll need to focus on describing the big picture and basics and avoid a lot of technical language. Or if the audience will have some background knowledge about the topic, but probably won't know specifics and may have some misunderstandings about it, therefore we'll need to provide an overview of the big picture, identify common misunderstandings or myths, and be sure to define technical terms. If the audience already knows a lot about the topic, and some may even be experts, that means we'll need to acknowledge their expertise, provide an overview of the big picture, focus on specifics, and it'd be okay to use a lot of technical language. So here, this whole thing is just designed to get things, the presenters thinking through who their audience is going to be and what are the implications on how their presentation should therefore flow. Under topics, what we have students do here is just to slow down a second and think, if your audience doesn't remember anything from your presentation but this one thing, what's the most important idea of your whole presentation? And so students sort of debate that, formulate it, and then they'll note it here. Likewise, what are the main ideas that are going to be in your presentation? So what's the most important idea, and then what are the main ideas? Finally, we have them think about a hook. In other words, what would be a good way to begin your presentation that would hook the audience and make them really interested in what you're about to do? So that's an example of the PATH presentation plans smart sheet. What we're going to do now is sort of jump over to evaluating project processes and outcomes. There are a variety of tools here. They're basically like rubrics. I'm going to open up this first one, collaboration evaluation. And just to look at this for a second, first of all, a teacher can be using this, or it can be a peer evaluation of another peer, or it can be a student's self-evaluation, or it can be the team or the group's self-evaluation. So we might use this on a particular task associated with the project, not necessarily the whole project, but rather a particular task associated with it. So we may use this actually multiple times because there may be multiple tasks involved. So the way this works is what I've done is I've listed some of those same key collaboration skills that we talked about earlier, like listening without interrupting, turn taking, involve everyone, and so forth. And so what the evaluator does is rate how well they did that. And so they either did this really well, or they did this just a little, or they really just forgot to do this. Likewise, over here, we're going to make a list of what were the collaboration strategies that were most effectively used, which ones to work on more, and then finally a specific collaboration strategy to do differently next time. Like when this happens, then what are we going to do that should be different? Skipping down to presentation evaluation, just take a look at that one just briefly to give you a sense of what that's about. Okay, and again, different people can use the same tool to do the evaluation, and it's still set up in terms of did really well, did it some, but could do a little more, or need to work on this. And so this is divided into two major areas. One is the content of the presentation, or the actual information that was shared, and then the performance, or how the information was shared. So for an example, under the content, the overall content had a clear focus, ideas and concepts tied together via a theme. The ideas were important, accurate, clear, and meaningfully organized and synthesized. It extends, elaborates, and connects ideas and concepts to the audience interest in relevant real-life issues or problems to be solved. Under presentation performance, there are things like the presentation is appropriate for the audience. The content is linked to the audience's background knowledge and concerns. It uses varied communication formats, and so it's beyond the simple oral report, and so forth and so on. So you get a sense of how we can use this as a rubric. But the other thing we can do is we can use it at the beginning when the students are planning the presentation, is to go over this rubric to give them a sense of what are the kinds of things they need to be thinking about when they're designing their presentation. Finally, we're going to take a look at this end of project evaluation tool. This again can be used by different people, like it can be an evaluation of the student, his or herself, or another student, or the whole team. And then down here is who's actually performing the evaluation. And so what we're looking at are critical variables related to being a good member of a team, or an effective member, and how well that individual is contributing to the effort. And so you have various things like reliability. So on this side is didn't fulfill their obligations, we couldn't count on this person, versus fulfilled them extremely well, could always count on. Work quality, very poor, very high. Doing one share, doing less than your share, or far more than your share. Attitude, negative, pessimistic, undermine the spirit of the team, versus can-do, positive, optimistic attitude, help the whole team. Timeless, they procrastinated, they couldn't get their stuff in on time, they always impaired the team, versus they're always ready, and the tasks are completed on time, etc. Okay, so we will use this from time to time at the end of a project to evaluate individual students and give them a sense of how well they contributed. But probably even more importantly is we'll use this back toward the beginning of the project to give them and go over this in terms of helping students understand what are the various factors that play into being a real good collaborator and contributor to the overall project. So what we've been looking at is simply a variety of sampling of tools from the project-based learning section of the software. There are a number of others that you may want to sort of click through and check out and so forth. So now you should have a good sense of a lot of Smartsheets here that can help you teach the content and the content literacy standards, a variety of vocabulary and project-based learning. And so what I would encourage you to do is just kind of spend some time really exploring this, because there are probably a lot of tools here that can help you teach all of those standards, and wish you the best of luck.